This video will give you some hints on approaching the project for Module 5. This project has a given set of data, and then it's asking you to construct a two-way table and compute some probabilities and answer one of these research questions. So it's going to ask you to identify the response and explanatory variables, calculate some percentages, make some pie charts and bar charts, and answer the question. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an example that uses a different set of data, but we're going to visit this rubric to make sure that we've hit all the points that we're supposed to hit. Alright, so let's take a look at the data that we're going to examine. That is going to be the serial data. And the research question we're going to ask is, are the cereals targeted toward children deliberately placed in the middle shelf? Okay. So all we really want out of this set is we want to capture the target and the shelf data. And so I'm going to copy that and open up a new page, a new sheet, and paste those two columns. Alright, so we want to construct our table. One way to do that is to sort and count. Or one way to do that is to count, and you have adult top, and then you make a two-way table and make tick marks and stuff like that. But to make things a little bit easier, you can sort. You can go to I highlighted A and B. I'm going to go to data, and I don't want to just sort by one column. I want to sort by two columns. So let's click on sort range. And I have headers up on top, the target and the shelf, and I want to sort by target first from A to Z, and then here you can add another sort column, sort by shelf from A to Z. So you'll ask it to sort, so you can count the number of adults here that are in the bottom shelf, number of adults in the middle shelf, number of adults in the top shelf, and then keep going until you see the children's cereal now. Children's in the bottom and middle, etc. So that's one way to do that. Another way to do it that would give you the results right away is through what's called a pivot table. So I'm going to highlight everything, including the headers. Whether it's sorted or not, it doesn't matter. And see, I went all the way down to 78, and so if I remember, I have 77 cereals, and if I count the header, that's 78 lines that I'm taking up. So I'm going to go to data and pivot table. So the pivot table begins by creating a blank table here, and I need to identify my fields for columns and rows. So my row is going to be the explanatory variable, and based on the research question, I think my explanatory variable is going to be the target, adult and children. So for my rows, I'm going to select target. And for my columns, I will select shelf. So you see the table is almost set up. I just need some values in there. So what are the values going to be? Values are a little tricky. It turns out that you can select either the shelf or the target here. I'm just going to select target. And right now a bunch of zeros pop up. So I'm not adding them up. And the thing to do here is that in Excel and in Google Sheets, there's this formula called count A. That means you're counting if you're matching the value. So I'm going to select count A, and then that's going to give me my values. So it looks like the child top, there's no children's cereal in the top shelf, and this is blank, so that's going to be a 0. I'm going to want to insert a 0 there. But this is your table. The best thing that I found was to copy this table, since this is a pivot table page, and it's dependent on anything changing in your previous sheet. I want to just work with this and be able to adjust it and change things if I need to. So I'm going to copy this, highlight that table and copy it, and then I'm going to open up another sheet, and then I'll paste my data here. Um, Oops, I think I have to paste it a certain way, so let me undo this and I'll paste the values. I don't want the formulas themselves. I want the values, so I can put in 0 here as I need to. And so that's what I'm going to do, is put 0 there. Alright, so now I'm going to make this, reconstruct this back to the table. I'm going to put all the borders around. The grand total here, I think this should just be total instead of grand total. That's not a big deal. So the reason I want this is that so I can move things around, change things if I need to. I might be interested in doing that because I'm going to be making a bunch of different graphs. Alright, so that's how you make your contingency table. And when you're ready to paste this onto your document, you can just copy this and then paste it onto something else. Alright, so now let's make some graphs. There's several types of graphs that you can make, and one of them is to make an adult graph and a child graph that separates the shelving. So I'm going to copy this and put this off to the side here. I'm going to make 2 new graphs. For the first one, I'm going to delete this child, this row of child, delete row, and then for the second one, I'm going to delete the adult. So what this is going to allow me to do is going to allow me to create a bar graph or a pie chart that has the adult information only, and then a pie graph, a pie chart or a bar graph that would have the child information only. And so as we've seen before, once you've gotten your data, it becomes really easy to create a graph. So I'm going to highlight this first one and I'm going to say insert and chart, and then here's your first recommendation, pie chart, exactly what I wanted. You can also do the bar if you want. I think the pie chart looks nice, so I'm just going to go ahead and select that. So this is one chart, and then I can create this child chart as well. If I highlight that and I click on chart again, it's going to give me a pie chart for that. Notice that because there's 0 on the top shelf, there's no top shelf option here, and that's okay. And this is even color coordinated with the other chart, so you can use these 2 charts. Oops, you can use these 2 charts for comparison. So that's it's a quick way to make these charts, and it's all dependent on setting up your data. Now, I can also create another kind of bar graph that compares adult and child by splitting up the bottom, the middle, and the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight those values without the totals, and I'm going to say insert and chart again. And if you take a look at this, the first one that pops up is a double bar chart that gives you the bars for adult and child. And again, there's no red graph over here for the child because there's no child serials on top. Alright, so that's another good graph that might be useful. What I don't recommend is I don't recommend including the totals. If you highlight this including the totals, it's not going to give you a meaningful graph because it's going to count for the total as well. So usually that's not a good thing to add up. Another thing you can do is you can switch the order. Notice that we have the adults and children serial here. Let's go back to this graph and let's do another insert. There's this customization where we can change the order. I think maybe we need to um, insert this first. Let's go ahead and insert this, and let's change the order of the data here. So I think if we do some advanced editing, and under customization, if we take the series as the adults or the children's, well, doesn't look like we can switch the orders for these things, so why don't I just not worry about that. Okay, I'm gonna take away that graph. So now let's take a look at the rubric and see what's needed here. We need a research question. We need a two-way table. We need some conditional percentages. We need some explanation for the conditional percentages. We need a comparison of conditional percentages. We need some graphs. We need a thesis conclusion. So here's one that I've already written. We have the research question starting off here, and then we have our two-way table here. And then now the text for this talks about the explanatory variable, and the explanatory variable is going to be the target. Okay, so that explains that. And we have a couple of pie graphs that splits up the explanatory variable. So the adults and how they break up, the children's and how they break up. So that was part of the conditions for the rubric. It's asked us to compute some probabilities, some conditional probabilities. So here are the conditional probabilities that were computed. It's a probability that cereal will be placed in the middle given that it's an adult cereal, and a probability that your cereal will be placed in the middle given that it's child cereal. So here are the two percentages that we got, and then we compare them, and in the comparison you have three choices to compare. I chose the ratio comparison, where we took one of them and divided by the other, and we get a value 6.65. And then the interpretation for that is here. The 6.65 is the number of times more likely that you'll get placed in the middle shelf if you are a child cereal. So that's the interpretation. And then to come back and answer the research question, based on this, you're 6 times more likely. So yes, it does seem like a child's cereal will be placed in the middle shelf. It's 6 times more likely to be placed in the middle shelf. So yes, it would be. Now, if you notice the rubric has some bonus for creative and interesting observations that you might have had. And so I made another version of this that went from 1 page to 3 pages that takes a look at some other aspects. So this is your base one, and your other one where bonus would be considered to be something like this. So this particular setup has headers for each of these things. We got the research question and data, and some initial findings. So in the initial findings, I computed some marginal probabilities that took a look at where any random cereal would be placed in the bottom, middle, or top. So this wasn't split up into a child or an adult cereal, but it took a look at all the cereals put together. So there's some comment about that. It included that graph where we took a look at the bar graph and split up by the adults and the children's. And this is where explanatory variable was defined. The shelf distribution for adults, so these are the same two graphs that came up. In the original one that I had two conditional probability computations. These are the two conditional probability computations that I had that focused on the middle um, middle shelf. But I saw something interesting in that the top shelf had all adult cereals, and this should be children's, and there were 0 children's cereal in the top shelf. So this is an interesting um, result that came out of the data. And the comparisons were made. There's a difference comparison where I just took the difference of the percentages. I took the ratio comparison. This is the one I ended up using in the first one. But again, for more exploration, I included the 3 different types of comparison. And so here, the percent change. And we've spoken in class about not having over 100% unless you're talking about some sort of percent change or percent increase. So here it seems like there is a 576% increase in chances of being placed in the middle shelf compared to an adult cereal. Okay, and so I included all those comparisons, but I wanted to focus on the ratio comparison as the clearest way to explain this. And so in my final conclusion, after comparing the above conditional probabilities, we can conclude that a child's cereal is over 6 times more likely to be in the middle shelf compared to an adult cereal. Therefore, to answer a question, we say yes, it does seem like children's cereal placed in the middle shelf. Okay. So this included everything from the research question to the table to conditional probabilities and explanations to the comparison of conditional probabilities and explanations, and then our thesis or the answer to our research question. And so it also included some other interesting observations that were part of the set. And so if you include some of those, that's how you can be able to obtain some bonus points in your project. Okay, so I think that should be enough for an example for you to go by. I will have copies of these things available to view for you to view and hopefully be able to model as you do your own project. All right, so good luck in your project.